And for this, we want to start out with some unsalted butter. So whenever you're baking, I like to say, you want to make sure the butter is at room temperature. And that means that you can just get your finger to make a nice little impression in the butter without you having to dig into it too far. I would say around 65 degrees Fahrenheit. So we want to put this butter into our mixer. So this is 8 ounces of unsalted butter. And now we want to get this smooth, because the first thing we're going to make is something called torta di mele, an apple cake, very moist apple cake. And the important trick here is to make sure that you do enough creaming of the butter with the sugar. So we have 1 cup of sugar, and ideally you want to cream for about 4 or 5 minutes to make sure that everything is well mixed and well blended. So do that on fairly high speed, so 4 or 5 minutes. So if you're using a stand mixer like this, every once in a while you have to take your spatula and go around the bowl to make sure that you have all of the butter and the sugar well mixed. And we're adding eggs today, 3 large eggs. Now I want to put them in one at a time to make sure that they get well blended. So again, I'm going to stop and make sure I get all that butter down again into the base of the bowl, because I can see that that is not all mixed together. And now we want to get that mixed again. You want to start out ahead of time soaking some raisins. So here is 3/4 of a cup of raisins that we have soaking in some water. You want to plump them up. So just let them sit in the water, 45 minutes or so before you do the cake. And then drain them off. And I'm just going to put them into my mixing bowl. Some nuts that we have toasted beforehand. These are just pine nuts. About 1/3 of a cup of pine nuts. Put them on a bake tray in the oven at 350. Watch them for about 5 minutes, or you could just get them browned very quickly in a little pan on the stove top. And I'm going to put those in with the raisins. After you've got it all well mixed, you want to add in some flour. And we have a cup of unbleached all-purpose flour. And you really want to measure that very lightly into a dry measure. This is a dry measure. So I'm going to stop this now. Add the flour. So 1 cup of unbleached all-purpose flour goes in. And with it, 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder. And that's the general rule that you should adhere to when you're baking, that a cup of flour normally takes between 1 and 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder. So that goes in. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And again, we mix that all around. Get that well blended. So slowly, about 1/4 of a cup of milk goes into our batter. And again, every once in a while, you want to go back and make sure that you wipe down the sides of the bowl. You really, in baking, never want to rush things. We're going to put this into our bowl now with the raisins and the pine nuts. If you didn't have pine nuts, you could use walnuts in this. You could use almonds. Get that all in. And while we're doing this, of course, our oven is on at 350 degrees. And we're baking this in a 9 by 2 inch cake pan. Now we need to add the zest. So about 1 tablespoon of lemon zest. I'll take the rest of that off later. Okay, there's our zest. And now we need to mix this up really nice and put this into our pan. And then the last thing we need to do are those apples. So here is my bake pan. I already buttered and floured it. That's going to help me get the cake out. And now we put the batter right into the pan. And then we have our apples. And you see here, I have one apple that I've already done. And when I do apples ahead of time, what I like to do is just put them in some lemon juice with water. And that way, my apple will not turn color, because you need 2 apples for the top of this cake. I put this on top, push down, and that gives me my wedges. Oh, that's a hard one. Okay, so here are all of our apple slices, and now all we want to do is put them into the top of the cake. And you just want to just push them down, going around. Push them down because they're going to bake, they're going to fall into the cake and kind of be a little bit congealed inside the dough there, but it's going to give a wonderful moist flavor. This is going to bake, for about 30 or 35 minutes or so. Okay, there is our torta di mele all ready for the oven, and that's going to bake about 30 to 35 minutes, or just until a cake skewer comes out clean when you put it into the center. So we'll have to keep our eye on that and watch that. Go around the inside, loosen the cake away from the sides, and you may want to put a piece of buttered parchment paper in the base of your pan before you put the batter in. Then put a dish over the top and shake, and voila! See this piece of parchment paper? That helped get me out. Isn't that great? So now we want to flip this over, or you could leave it just like that. Absolutely beautiful. So get the plate that you're going to serve it on and just turn it back. And there it is. I've got some apple jelly that I have melted down. And you just take a pastry brush after the cake is, while the cake is still warm, not cold, and then just take it and brush it. And then you just cut this into a wedge. So there you have it.